I want to welcome you to Dream Chasers Radio with me, your host, Yaya Diamond. What's up, people? How you doing? It is a great day. And let me tell you something. I have a guest on the show today. He is amazing. He's this author, but he's not only an author, he wrote about, never mind. I'm not even going to say anything, but I am going to say that we have David on the show today, and I want to welcome him to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi,
How are you, Yaya?
How are you?
I'm doing well, I guess.
So tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm Dave Gladen, and I studied Russian when I was in the Air Force. And this was back in the 60s. And after a course at Indiana University and Syracuse University, I was stationed in Japan and then Alaska. And after I got out of the service, I didn't really do anything with my Russian, although I did turn it into a degree. But my father-in-law knew I spoke Russian, and when he got a book from a Russian friend of his about named Valeriy Polekh, which it was in Russian. So he asked me to translate the part of it that had his pictures in it. So I did. And then I asked him if he thought they would be interested in the rest of the book. So I did. I translated the rest of the book, and there it is. And it was an interesting story. Whoops. It was an interesting story. He tells about people, his life, but mostly he talks about people he knew and the people that helped him, the musicians. And then he had because he was a leading musician, he was assigned to have a dacha, which he built out not too far from Moscow. And some of his neighbors were Russian, not just musicians, but Russian generals from World War II. And he got to know them. He describes them. But along the way, he met some other interesting people, like when he was in the Army in World War II, he met he had a director who wrote really good marches, but the director got upset with one of the musicians, and he was so mad, he assigned the musician, to go to the front, essentially exiled him to the front line.
Oh, wow. That's like execution. Like, you're dead.
Yeah, the director actually forgave him and let him back in after a while, but
wow,
it was pretty rough on him.
I know it was. Oh my gosh. What was it like to translate the book? Because I mean, it's your book, but it's not your book. It's like you went through the actions of this book. How did this all pair out for you? Because I know that when you were reading it, you were like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's very it was interesting for me, but my background was in the military, so most of my vocabulary in Russian was military terms. And now this is a fellow who's talking about everyday life, and this is completely different. So it was a bit of a struggle. I have several dictionaries, and I use them all.
I could just see you there.
Wow. But Valeriy Polekh, interesting fellow. He started out from well, actually, he got interested in music because his dad played the balalaika. And there was one hanging on the wall in the house when he was growing up, and he wanted to play it, and he did. Now that's a long way from a French horn.
Oh yeah.
But it started him on music, and he grew into it. He got involved with a factory wanted to have a band, so they had a marching band for festivals and things like that, sort of like a school band, only it's a factory band. Okay,
Wow.
and the director would take beginning musicians that knew practically nothing and teach them the rudiments of musicianship, what a staff was, what, how to hold a horn. Okay, well, Valerie started out with a trumpet and eventually got to a French horn, and he just grew from there and became really one of the best musicians in Moscow. He played for the Bolshoi theaters and knew all the musicians there. I should. One of the people he met along the way was one of his teachers. That when he got to the music school, and the teacher had him play and looked at him and said, "Okay, you put the horn away for 2 weeks, and then we'll change the location on your mouth, where you put your mouth on the mouthpiece, because you're playing it like a trumpet instead of a French horn." And and I thought, now that's a little strange for me. I wouldn't have thought that you'd have to do that, but he did, and he did. My father-in-law said that Valeriy Polekh played a really lush, romantic style of French horn, where my father-in-law was really quite adept. He played for the played in Los Angeles for all the studios and things like that.
That's really cool.
Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram. Thank you for watching.
I could tell that this book has affected you, though. It brings a smile to your face when you think about the stories. How did this book change you, or did it?
It showed me a different view of life in Russia than I had before. This is a view of life that you don't get from reading a history book or reading travelogues or things like that. For instance, growing up, Valeriy Polekh had cousins, and the cousins had put on plays, and they wrote their own plays and put them on for themselves and their neighbors, and they had a really good time. In their house, they had a Russian stove. You have to understand what a Russian stove is. It's you have the cooktop here, but above the cooktop, behind it, there's like a platform, and that's where the mother and father slept, on this platform above the stove. And you'll find in some of the Russian books a fellow saying something like, "I'd like to lay all day on the stove." And you wonder, what on earth is he talking about? Well, this is what he's talking about. This platform above the stove was really nice and warm. Polekh said when he was a kid, he just loved to get up there and lie under the covers, under this, where this warm stove was, and just relax then in his cousin's home. And it's different life. It's a different life. That's not the way I grew up.
No, I can agree. Wow. Well, I mean, I would have never known if you hadn't have said anything.
Polekh got to know. I mentioned that he got to know generals. Well, one of the people he got to know was General Zhukov. Now, most people have never heard of General Zhukov, but in Russia, he held a position similar to what Eisenhower held during World War II, where he was in charge of all the Russian armies. Zhukov was. Well, after the war, Zhukov is retired. He's living in an apartment. He wants to trade to a different apartment, and Polekh and Zhukov swap apartments. The control over evidently the government has a control over people that apartment rental. And if you want to trade, you have to go through a rigmarole through the government to swap apartments. Well, they went through it, and the families developed friendship out of it. For Polekh, who started out really from the bottom of a nobody, to get to know General Zhukov, who was the top elite in Russian, who's who in Russia. That's really something. Now, one of the things that happened when he got to know Zhukov was the Communist Party had gotten afraid of General Zhukov because he was so powerful. So they were actually trying to get him so depressed that he would kill himself. And Polekh expresses this in a kind of an allegorical poem that doesn't name Zhukov, calls him something else, but it expresses what happened. And Polekh and his family helped bring Zhukov and Zhukov's family out of this depression then, and bring him, get him back into a happier frame of life then. Otherwise, he probably would have committed suicide because the party was really depressing him.
Wow. It's amazing to see the life of another person just in the translation. You know, if you had to do it all again, what would you do? Anything different?
What would I do different? I would really wish I could have gotten to know Polekh, but he was in and out of the States long before I met my wife, actually. So there was no chance I would have met him here. Jim Decker and his wife visited Polekh in Moscow, and were really treated like royalty by the Polekhs. But I really wish I could know more about what happened to the family. Zhukov and Polekh had daughters that were really good friends. I wonder. I'd really like to know, did they continue that friendship after they grew up? I know his daughter became a French horn player and played with the big symphonies in Moscow there. I really wish I could know the family better now.
Wow. Well, I mean, that is good. I mean, you got a lot out of just a translation, to the point where, do you feel like anyone that reads this book would feel like they were family?
I think they would. I think if you read this book, you would understand better how it was to grow up in Russia. This fellow started. His lifetime spanned the practically the lifetime of the communist power in Russia, and he made it work. He was on top of it, and he had good friends, and still you can tell he maintained his integrity through it, and did not. He's not negative about the other people. He's really positive about the people he meets and what they're going through.
Awesome. Wow.
One interesting incident he talks about is they were playing a piece, a orchestral piece that involved an organ, and for some reason the organ wasn't stopping. Once you started playing it, it kept on playing. So one of the violinists was quite a jack of all trades. So he looked at the organ and he couldn't fix it, but he said, "I know what we'll do." And he got an axe, and this violinist crouched in the back then where the pipes were, and when the organ was supposed to stop, he chopped a hole in the pipe, in the air pipe that fed the organ, and stopped it.
Well, I don't think that organ worked after that.
I imagine they had to call a repairman, but the organ stopped and the performance went just fine, and the audience didn't notice anything.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Wow. Well, there's just so much richness and so much history in that book, but most of all, life that was in a different time and a different location, things that we're not used to hearing, like the bed, sleeping above the stove. I mean, I would never have thought, but it kind of makes sense. Russia's cold. You want to get into a warm spot. I think the warmest spot in the entire house would be either above the chimney, which isn't good, near the chimney, which probably won't be good, and near the stove, which is probably better. So Wow. Well, Mr. Gladen, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. And talking about the book that you translated just makes me think you wrote it.
Oh, it's a little awkward to talk about it, because most books, when you're talking about a book, you're talking to the author, the one that wrote it. But here it's someone else's book, and I'm just repeating what he said and trying to help other people understand what he said, and really that's it's been my one of the happiest thing about knowing another language is being able to help other people understand what's being said.
It is a great way to actually meet new people and learn new culture, and I think that you have really encompassed everything that needed to be encompassed by translating this book in the way that we can all understand it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Where can people find this book?
Well, it's on Amazon, and you can order it wherever you can order a book.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Well, like I said, I just. It sounds like you wrote it, you know what I mean? Because you know so much about it, and it makes you smile every time you talk about it. I want to thank you so much again for being on the show, Mr. Gladen. It has been such a pleasure having you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It's really interesting to talk about Valeriy Polekh. I wish I could have known him.
Yeah, well,
but,
you know what?
But he's gone now.
You do know him. You know him in his book. You know him in his funny, the organ situation and all the other things that he did. You know a lot about him.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, you
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to have the link to the book wherever you're watching, above, to the side, below. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. If you are interested in learning more about Mr. Valeriy Polekh, you need to go ahead and just like us, sit here and laugh about all the amazing things that he did and all of the things that are a little different than where you might have come from in your life and in your growing up. I want to thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Don't forget to dare to be different. And until next time, guys, bye.
I dare to be different.